$200 million. That's the number being whispered in basketball circles right now. $200 million for a single player. And the target, Caitlin Clark. Not from an NBA team, not from a European league. From a Saudi-backed basketball venture that's about to turn the WNBA inside out. And Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, sources say she's facing the fight of her career, because if this deal goes through, her resignation might not be optional. Let's filter out the noise and get to what's really happening here. While you were watching the WNBA celebrate its best season in history, record attendance, massive TV deals, Caitlin Clark mania taking over sports media, something else was happening behind the scenes. A heavily funded international league, backed by what insiders are calling unlimited Middle Eastern resources, has been quietly assembling offers that make WNBA salaries look like lunch money. And they're not just targeting role players, they're going after the crown jewels. Sophie Cunningham is reportedly already gone. Multiple sources confirm she secured a multi-million-dollar annual contract that exceeds everything she's earned in 6 WNBA seasons combined. But here's what should terrify the league office. Sophie isn't even a top 10 player. She's popular, marketable, talented, absolutely. But she's never been MVP caliber. And if they're throwing that kind of money at upper-tier talent, what are they offering Caitlin Clark? Many of you have been saying this for weeks. You saw this coming. The moment those record-breaking TV deals were announced, the moment the league started bragging about growth, you were asking the obvious question, where's that money going? Because it sure wasn't showing up in player salaries, and now we're watching the consequences unfold in real time. If you believe the story behind the story matters, if you think someone needs to connect these dots and show you what the league doesn't want you to see, smash that like button right now. It tells us we're on the right track, and trust me, what we're about to uncover gets way more intense. Here's the foundation you need to understand. The WNBA's maximum salary right now is approximately $250,000. The league's entire team salary cap is $1.46 million. Read that again. The entire roster of a WNBA team operates on less money than what a decent NBA bench player makes in a month. For years, players accepted this because there were no alternatives. You either played in the WNBA during the summer and went overseas in the winter to actually make money, or you didn't play professional basketball at all. But this new league, they're not playing by those rules. Reports suggest baseline salaries start at $2 million annually. For role players, the athletes who'd be making $80,000 to $150,000 in the WNBA are being offered contracts that would take them 20 years to earn domestically. Mid-tier stars are reportedly seeing offers between $5 and $10 million per year. And for the league's absolute biggest names, we're talking 9-figure guaranteed deals. Caitlin Clark's reported offer sits somewhere in that stratosphere. Some sources say $100 million. Others whisper it could be as high as $200 million over multiple years. For context, that's more than many NBA players will earn in their entire careers. And she's 1 year into her WNBA journey, making roughly $76,000 as a rookie. The math isn't just compelling, it's overwhelming. You were on to something when you noticed how defensive Commissioner Engelbert got during recent press conferences. That moment where she talked about being disheartened, mentioning her kids being devastated by comments, that wasn't about random criticism. That was about the walls closing in. Because here's what's really happening. The league's board of governors, the team owners who've invested millions based on growth projections centered around players like Caitlin Clark, they're reportedly furious. Emergency meetings have been called. The question being asked isn't if there will be consequences for leadership. It's when, let's be clear about why this is different from players going overseas during the off-season. WNBA athletes have been supplementing their income with international contracts for decades. That was accepted, expected even, because domestic salaries weren't enough. But this new Saudi-backed venture isn't asking players to work a second job in the winter. They're asking them to make the international league their primary commitment, to walk away from the WNBA entirely. to choose financial security over everything the American League represents. And reading between the lines of what we're hearing from multiple sources, the recruitment strategy is surgical. They started with someone like Sophie Cunningham intentionally. Not the biggest star, but someone visible, someone popular, someone whose departure would send a message. And the message is crystal clear. If we'll pay this much for her, imagine what we'll pay for you. It's psychological warfare disguised as contract negotiations. The LIV Golf comparison isn't just convenient, it's the exact blueprint. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund didn't just challenge the PGA Tour, they systematically dismantled it by offering guaranteed money that traditional sports economics couldn't match. Phil Mickelson got $200 million. Dustin Johnson got $125. These weren't just competitive offers, they were designed to be impossible to refuse. And what happened? The PGA Tour, after months of resistance, after suspending players and claiming moral high ground, eventually admitted defeat and announced a merger. Now apply that same strategy to women's basketball, a league that's not even profitable on its own, that requires NBA financial support to operate, that's been telling players for years to be patient while the business grows. And suddenly, there's a competitor with effectively unlimited resources offering life-changing money immediately. Commissioner Engelbert can't match these offers. The revenue doesn't exist. The business model doesn't support it. She's in an impossible position. But here's where it gets really complicated. Professional sports commissioners are judged by one metric above all others. Can you keep your league's stars? Everything else? The TV deals, the attendance records, the social media buzz, all of it becomes irrelevant if your marquee players are leaving. And Caitlin Clark leaving wouldn't just be losing a star, it would be losing the single most important figure in WNBA history at the exact moment when her presence could have transformed the league into something truly sustainable. Connecting the dots reveals something even more troubling. Multiple players have already expressed frustration with Engelbert's leadership this season. Nafisa Collier and others publicly criticized the league's response to safety concerns. Players felt abandoned when increased attention brought harassment and aggressive fan behavior. They felt the commissioner was too corporate, too cautious, too disconnected from their reality. Now add a financial crisis that threatens their future earning potential, and you've got a leadership trust problem that goes way beyond just money. The timeline matters here. The WNBA just completed its best season ever. Television viewership shattered records. Arenas sold out. Corporate sponsors lined up. This should have been Commissioner Engelbert's victory lap. Instead, she's reportedly facing pressure from team owners, criticism from players, and the very real possibility that the league's foundation could crumble if even 2 or 3 stars accept these Saudi offers. Because once the exodus starts, it accelerates. Professional athletes watch what their peers do. When they see Sophie Cunningham securing generational wealth, they ask themselves hard questions. When they see Caitlin Clark potentially taking a 9-figure deal, staying loyal to a league paying them $76,000, starts to feel less like dedication and more like leaving money on the table. The cascade effect could be devastating. We're getting into speculation territory here, but multiple sources suggest that if Caitlin Clark signs with this international league, Engelbert's resignation won't be a choice. The board would likely force her out. The optics alone would be indefensible. How do you explain to investors, to television partners, to fans, that you lost the player who single-handedly elevated the league's profile to unprecedented heights? You don't. You take responsibility and step aside. But removing Engelbert doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The next commissioner faces the exact same impossible economics. The WNBA can't print money. It can't suddenly generate the revenue needed to compete with sovereign wealth funds. The league's entire business model is built on gradual growth, incremental salary increases, long-term sustainability. That model doesn't have an answer for competitors who don't need to be profitable, who can operate at massive losses indefinitely. because they're backed by oil money and political objectives that have nothing to do with basketball economics. And that brings us to the real question that nobody in the league office wants to address publicly. What happens if they lose this fight? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think happens if Caitlin Clark takes a Saudi offer. Does the WNBA survive? Does Commissioner Engelbert keep her job? Because I want to hear your predictions, and I guarantee you, based on what we're seeing behind the scenes, some of you are going to be exactly right. The WNBA has one potential countermove, and it's risky. They could attempt an emergency renegotiation of the collective bargaining agreement. The current CBA runs through 2027, but unprecedented circumstances sometimes call for unprecedented actions. The league could theoretically approach the players' union and propose dramatically increased salary caps, revenue-sharing structures that give players a larger percentage of league income, or even individual carve-outs for superstar contracts that exceed the normal maximum. But here's the problem with that strategy. The money has to come from somewhere. The WNBA is not yet profitable on its own. It exists through NBA subsidization and revenue from television deals that, while improved, still pale in comparison to major men's sports. Even if every team owner agreed to operate at a loss, even if the NBA increased its financial support, the league might be able to double or triple player salaries. That would be a massive improvement for the athletes, but it still wouldn't come close to what Saudi Arabia is offering. You're looking at a situation where the absolute best-case scenario, the league dramatically restructuring its entire financial model, immediately implementing changes that would normally take years of negotiation, still leaves them competing with one hand tied behind their back. They could offer Caitlin Clark $2 million a year and think they're being revolutionary. The Saudis could offer $10 million and not even blink. The competitive imbalance isn't just significant, it's insurmountable. There's also the geopolitical dimension that adds another layer of complexity. Saudi Arabia isn't investing in sports purely for business reasons. This is part of a broader strategy called sports washing, using athletic events and leagues to improve the country's international reputation and distract from human rights concerns. When you accept money from that source, you're entering into an implicit arrangement that goes beyond basketball. Players would have to weigh financial security against legitimate ethical questions about who's funding their contracts and why. Some athletes will prioritize the money. That's their right. Professional sports careers are short, and the opportunity to secure generational wealth doesn't come around often. Others might decide that the association with Saudi Arabia, given the country's record on women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and human rights generally, makes the financial offer unacceptable, regardless of the amount. There's no single correct answer to that moral calculation, but the fact that players are being forced to make it highlights just how dramatically the landscape has shifted. Let's talk about what we're not hearing from the league office: radio silence. Commissioner Engelbert has been notably absent from public commentary on this situation. No press conferences addressing the Saudi threat directly. No reassuring statements about player retention strategies. No bold announcements about emergency salary increases. The silence is deafening, and it tells you everything you need to know about how unprepared the league was for this scenario. Behind the scenes, sources describe chaos. Agents fielding calls from international representatives, players privately discussing offers with teammates, team owners demanding answers from league headquarters about what the plan is. And allegedly, based on multiple independent reports, conversations about Engelbert's future that range from concerned to openly hostile. The consensus among team owners seems to be that whether the commissioner could have prevented this crisis is almost beside the point. Someone has to be held accountable. The most devastating scenario, the one that keeps league executives up at night, isn't even that Caitlin Clark leaves. It's that she leaves and brings others with her. Imagine Clark signs a massive Saudi deal. Then Angel Reese, not wanting to be left behind, takes a similar offer. Then Aja Wilson decides she can't pass up $50 million guaranteed. Suddenly you're not dealing with one or two departures. You're watching a wholesale talent migration that leaves the WNBA as a developmental league for players who eventually leave for the real money overseas. That's the LIV Golf nightmare scenario. The PGA Tour didn't just lose a few stars, they lost so many that the entire competitive structure of professional golf was threatened. Tournaments lost credibility, sponsors got nervous, television partners started questioning their investments. The tour was forced to essentially surrender and negotiate a merger. The WNBA could face the same fate, except they're in a far weaker negotiating position because the league isn't profitable to begin with. What makes this even more painful for longtime WNBA supporters is the timing. This was supposed to be the breakthrough year. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, the 2024 rookie class, was being called the most important in league history. The attention was finally there. Mainstream sports media was covering games. Celebrities were showing up courtside. Young girls were buying jerseys and attending games with their families. The cultural momentum was undeniable. And now there's a real possibility that the very players who generated that momentum could be gone within a year. Not because they don't love the WNBA, not because they don't appreciate the fans, but because someone with effectively unlimited money decided to test whether the league's foundation was as strong as it appeared. And the test is revealing cracks that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Commissioner Engelbert's greatest mistake might not have been anything she did. It might have been what she failed to anticipate. The WNBA spent years lobbying for better television deals, improved working conditions, and incremental salary increases. All of that work was based on an assumption that the league operated in a stable, competitive environment where the only challenge was growing the sport domestically. Nobody planned for a scenario where a sovereign wealth fund decided to use unlimited resources to poach American talent. But that's where we are. And the question isn't whether the WNBA should have seen this coming. The question is what they do now, because the clock is ticking. Contract decisions are being made. Players are weighing offers. And every day that passes without a clear, aggressive response from league leadership is a day closer to the moment when the WNBA's biggest stars announce they're leaving. If this story matters to you, if you want to see what happens when the WNBA finally responds, you need to subscribe and turn on notifications right now. This situation is developing rapidly, and we're going to be covering every development, every rumor, every emergency board meeting. The next video breaks down exactly what leverage the WNBA still has, and trust me, there might be one card left to play that nobody's talking about yet. Don't miss it. The reality is simple and brutal. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is facing an impossible situation. She can't compete with Saudi money. She can't force players to choose loyalty over generational wealth. And she can't survive politically if the league's stars leave on her watch. The WNBA's crisis isn't just about money, it's about power, leverage, and what happens when a league that's been fighting for respect suddenly has to fight for survival. Stay locked in. This is just the beginning.